Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Today, I am very excited to bring to you the legend that is Dr. Robert Selig. This is our second attempt to record this, so please God, it works. If you don't know Dr. Selig, he is a legend in the functional medicine space. He's a functional medicine doctor, hair tissue mineral analysis expert. He's a mineral balancing practitioner, and he is owner of Back to Natural Health, Chicago's leading natural health clinic. And he is also creator of Selig Salts. So today, Dr. Selig, we're going to jump into all things salic salts, minerals, the whole shebang. Thank you
That's
for.
fantastic. I'm looking forward to this talk because minerals are the most fascinating thing in life. And just to start, to set the table, I always say minerals are the sparks of life. And the very first spark is when the the zinc loaded sperm, when it cracks the cosmic egg, the ovum, that creates life. And that's what science calls the zinc spark of life, creating life. That's how amazing these minerals are. They take organic chemistry, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and the inorganic metals bring life to carbon chemistry. So minerals are the foundational aspect of human health. And our goal is to learn, how do we optimize the minerals to build ourselves up so we're not dealing with a world of chronicity.
I believe that. I believe minerals are more important than most people realize. So hopefully we can drive home the importance in this conversation today. But before we do that, can you tell us what got you into the area of minerals and salts? Like what spurred your interest?
It all starts, everyone in the healing space starts as the wounded healer, and myself typically included in that, arena, being very sick as a kid, broken bones, going to the dentist every week, getting drilled, billed, and, really destroyed. So my health was horrible, and I had to figure out, how am I going to reverse engineer my health and just turn the table around? And I was either going to die doing it or figure it out. And that's what brought me to the world of minerals and energy-based medicine, because I had to heal myself. And under the god of Apollo, it says, physician, know thyself, physician, heal thyself. So when the physician learns how to heal himself, then he earns rite of passage to assist others on their healing journey.
That's the case for most practitioners, including myself. Our mess becomes our message, and then whatever we learn, our experiences, we can then hopefully guide others who need. And that's before we had Wi-Fi, internet, books, and all. That's how it was done, like in the days of Apollo and our great, 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 great ancestors. It was word of mouth. It was like, look, this is what happened to me. This is what I did, and it fixed it. And we would just keep sharing our knowledge.
Yes, sharing knowledge. And so we are inundated with knowledge today because of the internet. So we have to be wise on how we choose our knowledge, because there's going to be a new fad coming up. Every year there's a new nutrient, a new fad, and everyone's jumping on the bandwagon. What's always worked since the beginning of time is mineralization. So that's why we come back to the real gold. Gold is the sun, and that's aurum, and that's hydrogen, and that's magnesium. So we use the energy of these metals to bring, to really equalize our health in our body, because we are so disbalanced because of the toxicity, the chemicals, the metals, the radiation, destroying our enzymes, destroying the nutrient minerals. So we got to understand how important these minerals are. And even at death, they call it rigor mortis. So when we go into death, rigor mortis is a full-blown contraction, and rigor mortis, which is death, it's because all the calcium channels are being released, and calcium causes a full-blown contraction, and that is death. That's Father times Saturn. And so who opposes the calcium? That's magnesium, the sun. That's sodium and potassium. That's the Mars and the moon. So we need these energies to to keep calcium in check because calcium is premature aging. And calcium is a very important mineral, but when calcium precipitates out of solution, then it becomes Saturn's return, all our deposition diseases that will get us all in the end. Our goal is to slow down calcium metabolism, Saturn's return, so we can age gracefully and intelligently, so we don't end up in a nursing home having someone feed us or bathe us or go to the bathroom for us. So that's why we really want to work on our health today so we age gracefully.
That's funny. My kid said yesterday, we're going to put you in a nursing home. I'm like, not if I can help it. I'm like, well, you'll have no choice. I'm like, well, if I'm still functioning well by the time I get to that age, we won't need to put me in a nursing home.
That's true. So in the nursing home, a great strategy because you'll see your seniors can't take a lot of nutrients. They're
Mhm.
taking a lot of pharmaceuticals. What works brilliantly with the seniors are the tissue salts. The homeopathic tissue salts are amazing because anyone can take them, whether you're a baby, whether you're a senior, any population can take the tissue salts, and they help build up the mineral grid in a very safe, effective dose. So, love the tissue salts as part of the mineral balancing program.
Let's go back to this calcium for a minute because that was really interesting. In my practice and with a lot of my colleagues, we kind of work with people with cardiovascular disease, hardening of the arteries, and not just around the heart, people around the kidneys, everything, hardening of the blood vessels. And really, the discussion there is around the stress response, inflammation, and how that's causing the leaching of calcium, the accumulation of calcium where we don't want it to happen. And that is, well, we've got inflammaging, and now we've got this stress response that a lot of people talk about. Well, stress is making us old. But what you just said makes a lot of sense that continuing down this line over and over again, and you constantly build up an abundance of calcium that's dysregulated from the other minerals, now you die. Now you've got the
Saturn's return, death, full blown contraction, rigor mortis. So when we look at a hair test, we look at the Fab Four: calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. So we look at the calcium magnesium ratio, the sodium potassium ratio. When sodium potassium go low, then calcium precipitates out of solution. When it precipitates, then it becomes every deposition disease. The classic we think of kidney stones, gallstones, but that's your calcium hydroxyapatite causing your arthritic joints. Could be cataract, could be plaquing in the brain, could be the pineal gland calcification, could be plaquing in the arteries and the veins, could be the calcification happens every organ, tissue, and gland. That's why we're always keeping an eye on calcium. And magnesium opposes calcium. So when we look at a classic muscle contraction, calcium contracts, magnesium relaxes. So we want to see a good ratio of calcium and magnesium on a hair from a hair perspective. So when I look at a hair test, I'm looking at that calcium magnesium ratio because that affects all excitable tissue, whether it's a skeletal muscle, a cardiac muscle, a smooth muscle, or any nerve tissue for that matter. So that's why the mineral grid governs everything in the body. And so the Fab Four is how every nerve is fired. Sodium, potassium starts the action potential, and then it becomes depolarized, and then calcium is going to get into the end of a nerve terminal and release dopamine or acetylcholine or whatever the neurotransmitter.
So then, Dr. Selig, you're saying that in your perspective, and in a lot of people's perspective, the most important minerals are going to be your sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Like the rest, of course, we need them, but our primary focus should be on these four.
Absolutely, that's the Fab Four that govern every Every cell in your body, every nerve being fired is because of the Fab Four. So we always want to understand sodium, potassium are the great monovalent minerals that, basically dissolve the other, keep things in solution. And when you see a lot of sodium, potassium going low, that's when the calcium will precipitate out of the solution and then it deposits, kind of like the faucet. We see those calcium deposits building up. That's really the same principle that's going on, whether it's an artery, whether it's in the eye, whether it's in any organ or gland or tissue. It's the great calcification. And so we want to understand how magnesium works with calcium. We want to understand how sodium, potassium keep calcium in solution. So we understand the other minerals are absolutely completely important. But when we're balancing out the mineral grid, we always got to keep an eye on the calcium magnesium ratio and the sodium potassium ratio. Then we use the other transitional metals to help balance the Fab Four out, or the two most important mineral ratios in human physiology.
So, is the calcium rising and continuing to cause problems because of the stress response that I mentioned, or because of the imbalance of the other minerals, or do you think it's both?
Oh, it's both. There's always a physical, biochemical aspect. There's always an energetic aspect. That's why my goal is to merge the art and science of healing, because healing has always been an art and a science. We left the art out of healing and then we just become bean counting biochemistry, and you'll be as successful as that as navigating every drop of water from the Niagara Falls. So we want to understand the art part to healing. The art part to healing is understanding we're human beings and we have biochemical individuality. We each have different histories. We each have different, makeups on an emotional level. Everyone has had certain traumas in their life, some worse than others, some not as bad. So we want to understand the big picture, because healing is an art and a science. So I want to integrate the art back into the chemistry. And that's where I use energy-based medicine, usually in the form of homeopathy, to give you a remedy, energy, vibration, frequency, that will look at the mind, the body, and the symptom and just put it together in a totality to find the similia remedy. Because in homeopathy, it's similia, similibus curanta, like cures like. So when we find the like remedy, it's based on not just the physical, but the mind and the physicals, and absolutely everything about that person is how we find the similar remedy. And that will help when we're doing the mineral balancing. Then we have the energy medicine to help when we hit a healing reaction, a detox reaction, a medical aggravation, because we're all going to hit the speed bump in the road. We're all going to, maybe we get die off, maybe we start dumping a metal, maybe we're going through a divorce, maybe we have a death of a loved one, or our dog died. We're all going to take hits, and that's going to affect the physiology. And that's why minerals aren't just dead rocks. Minerals have a cosmic spirit, and that's why we understand as above, so below. So if I want to understand calcium, I want to understand the primal principle of Saturn. If I want to understand magnesium, I want to understand the primal principle of the sun. And then you can go down the line. You want to look at copper, understand Venus. You want to understand zinc, look at Jupiter. You want to understand iron, look at Mars. So this is how we integrate the energy and the biochemistry. And when those two worlds merge, now we have a real healing modality.
When you say look at the planets as they relate to mineral and mineral needs, what do you mean? Because I don't think most people have heard of that before, unless they've followed your work. They're like, what is he talking about planets for? So can you explain that a bit more?
Okay, let's look at a common theme of Venus. So when you think of the planet Venus, so if you want to understand copper, you got to understand the planet Venus. What does Venus represent? Love, sex, relationships, fertility, beauty, art. Maybe we're conflicted in our sexual relationships. Maybe we haven't, maybe we have sexual repression. Maybe we have sexual perversions. Maybe we're not expressing our artistic outlet. So when we don't grasp the primal principle of Venus, then the energy of copper will be dysregulated. So
Okay.
we got to make that connection, as above, so below. You could take all the copper to your blue in the face or do all the copper detox programs, but if you don't understand your stumbling block, your roadblock to understanding the Venetian energy, then that copper will stay dysregulated. But when you start to understand that, oh, maybe I got a pornography addiction that I need to look at and break that habit. Or maybe I need to be more honest in my relationships. Maybe I need to start working on my artistic expression that I put to the side, got caught up in work and life, and I stopped expressing myself artistically, then copper will stay dysregulated. So then we can come in with the energy, vibration, frequency remedy to help with the copper essence, the copper themes, while we're doing the physical, crude work. Hopefully that kind of made sense.
Yeah, so what I got is we're looking at our specific issues or roadblocks or signs or symptoms that we're struggling with, whatever we're struggling with, and we're looking at how they connect to the individual planet. And then from there, we look at what mineral attaches to that specific planet, and that is more than likely going to be the mineral that we need to focus on or replenish or bring up to help us address our issues.
Exactly. So, like if we looked at iron, let's say someone has a iron dysregulation problem, which most of us do. So if we have too much iron in us, that's an iron overload. So what planet does iron represent? That's Mars. That's the warrior. So maybe that Mars energy in us, maybe it's overly aggressive. Maybe we're always fighting and we're belligerent and we're always starting things up because the iron energy isn't in balance. Then on the flip side, if we're not fighting for the things that we love and believe in, then we become the anemic doormat and we get walked on. So when we start to understand, where do I need to forge the iron energy to build up the warrior in me, so I'm not the combative warrior, I'm not the anemic doormat getting walked on, I'm the warrior forging what I want to fight for. Then the iron metabolism in you will start to work for you. As you work for the mineral will work for you. So that's in a simple nutshell.
Where would high iron or hemochromatosis fall into that then?
So hemochromatosis on a genetic level,
Well, as it relates to the planets, because if Mars is more related to the low iron, then where are we going with the high iron?
Mars can be low or high. So
Okay.
every planet can be deficient or in excess. So let's say, if you're that Venetian guy and all you're doing is having sex 24/7, sleeping around, and you think that your Venus energy is good, that's the perverted version. Or let's say that you're a religious zealot and you think having sex is bad and dirty, then that's the repression of it. We don't want to repress it. We don't want to pervert it. We want to find the right energy. And that could be for any planet, because no planet is good or bad. There's an energy. We want to understand the energy of the planet. When we understand the energy of the planet, then that mineral will work for us in our physiology. So it's a deep concept, but that's alchemy at the root.
So that's really interesting because I don't think a lot of people have heard of the connection between the planets and their perception of life and how they're feeling and minerals and how it all connects. And I know like nobody speaks about alchemy anymore because I think it's very much connotated more towards witchery and witchcraft and stuff like that. But let's go back to the minerals because I want to focus on some of the symptoms and issues that a lot of people experience nowadays as it relates to fatigue, energy production, metabolic health. What I said at the very beginning of the conversation is me and you know how important minerals are. But most people don't know, and most people have all of these issues. Most people have the fatigue, they have the low thyroid, they have the anxiety, they have some sort of metabolic issue somewhere.
Yes, just to put it in perspective, when we're talking about energy, let's look at glucose metabolism, going from glucose through glycolysis to give us pyruvate. Pyruvate enters the Krebs cycle. Then the Krebs cycle is going to give us our NADPH that's going to enter the electron transport chain. So going from glucose to ATP is about 22 steps. 12 out of those 22 steps require magnesium. So magnesium's driving many of those steps in creating energy. So when we're fatigued and brain fogged and we can't, we're stuck on the couch and we lost the get up and go and all the drive, we got to start understanding and I'm just using one example of one mitochondria of how the importance of magnesium in generating energy is. There's other minerals involved, but I just stuck with one because magnesium is such a huge player in the mitochondria because that ATP must have magnesium bound to it to keep those electrons flowing because it's going to the magnesium allows the adenosine triphosphate to curl in the right geometry to keep the electrons flowing, and when the electrons stop flowing, you're dead. And so the chemical secret to life is the movement of electrons. So electrons, that's why minerals are moving electrons. And that's why we really got to understand copper moves electrons more so than any other nutrient mineral. So we got to respect copper because of its ability to move the electrons like nothing else. Because in the same vein, sometimes in a copper overload, because copper is so electrical, it can cause a lot of ROS, reactive oxygen species, producing the hydroxyl radical, which is a very damaging radical to nucleic acids, DNA, RNA, cell membranes, proteins, etc. It will destroy them. So we want to respect the minerals, but we want to understand the minerals from an energetic perspective and a biochemical perspective so we can really focus on balance out the mineral grid, the mineral matrix.
So minerals are essential for energy production, like essential.
Absolutely essential. Without them, we're dead.
Mhm.
You think about CO2. Do you know how CO2, what mineral regulates all your CO2? So when you produce the energy, the ATP, a byproduct is CO2, water and CO2. So the water that it's creating is actually structured water. And no one talks about how important that structured water is, because to me, even more important than the ATP is that structured water that's being produced in the mitochondria. But the CO2, for every molecule of CO2, what mineral regulates CO2? Do you know that one?
It's magnesium.
It's zinc.
Oh, because
Yeah.
zinc is a
So when you have CO2, I know it's a gas, but it behaves like a strong acid. So as soon as CO2 enters into the bloodstream, it can't stay there or you're dead. It will alter the pH and that's it. So the body has an intelligent way to deal with CO2 when it hits the blood. It immediately reacts with water via the ancient carbonic anhydrase zinc dependent enzyme to give you carbonic acid. Carbonic acid is the Trojan horse that can go into the bloodstream. It's a lesser acid, and when it goes into the bloodstream, then it will, it can deal with all the red blood cells and the CO2, take it to the lungs and disassociate the hydrogen, release the CO2 as a gas, and that becomes food for the plants and the trees. So zinc is regulating your carbonic acid, and that carbonic acid is how you make stomach acid. That carbonic acid is your number one bicarbonate buffering system. So zinc, when I say zinc is your number one alkaline mineral, it's because of carbonic acid. And that's just one enzyme that zinc is driving, because it drives 300 enzymes, and I'm just picking out one enzyme, carbonic acid, or carbonic anhydrase, that gives you carbonic acid. So that's just one example. So every molecule of CO2 you produce is regulated via zinc.
This is really interesting because someone asked me about the pH of the body yesterday, and they were discussing different things, and I was highlighting the fact, well, exercise makes the body acidic, but in the long term, the better your cardiovascular health is, the better you are at utilizing CO2, the better you are at managing the pH of your body, and this all just makes sense.
That's why the yogis understood the importance of breath. So every yogi that lives the longest have the greatest longevity, the real yogis. I'm not talking about your
The
American
LA
yogis.
mom yogis.
Yeah, the real yogis would understand how important breath work and CO2. And so understanding that CO2, and that's, when you lose a CO2, that's a decarboxylation. You're losing a CO2. That's one of the enzyme steps in many of the 6 classes of enzymes is a decarboxylation type of process. So understanding that zinc is your number one bicarbonate buffering system. So that's why we have to always look at these minerals not just as dead rocks and humps of clay. They are a cosmic force that bursts life, creating all the enzymes in the body to generate life and longevity. So that's why we got to respect the mineral grid, and we got to just not mega dose anything. We want to understand, why are we taking this? Why do I need the zinc? Why do I need the magnesium? Why am I taking calcium? And then to understand why and when to take it, we use a hair mineral analysis to govern when is a good time to dose copper. Because sometimes if you give copper to some patients and they're in slow oxidation, a normal sodium potassium ratio, giving copper will make them worse. But there's going to be times when giving copper, if you're in fast oxidation, we may give you copper to help raise the calcium to put the brakes on fast oxidation to slow it down. If you have a sodium potassium inversion, meaning that you got more potassium than sodium on a hair analysis, we may give you copper to help raise the sodium to fix the inversion. Now, if you're in a step up pattern on a hair mineral analysis is a very serious pattern. That means they're stepping out of life. They're on the verge of a aortic aneurysm, a heart attack, a stroke, an embolism, some cardiovascular event that will knock you out. So that's a time when 6 to 10 milligrams of copper is critical in that step up pattern. So step up pattern is where we're going to give you copper. Step down pattern, we're going to avoid copper. So that's why we use a hair mineral analysis to figure out when to dose the copper, how much zinc to give, how much calcium to give. When we look at a hair mineral analysis, it gives us a window into your biochemistry. And no test is perfect, because I'm still going to use blood, I'm still going to use urine, I'm still going to use stool, but I'm trying to paint a picture of your biochemistry, what is going on at this particular time in your life, so I can design a nutrient mineral balancing program to address your lab profiles.
Is the hair mineral analysis test your preference, or do you have a preference?
I think the hair mineral analysis is the most honest test in medicine. Now, if you have a high sodium potassium ratio, it's going to say you have inflammation. It's not going to tell us where the inflammation is. It's just you're going to be prone to inflammation. Then maybe we look at a blood test. If you have high homocysteine, high CRP, other markers of inflammation. Whoop.
No, we're good.
Oh, we're good. Okay, I thought we blocked out.
Just for a
Um,
split second.
Okay, so I'm going to look at blood, and I'm going to look at the hair, and I'm going to say, usually on hair, let's say if calcium is high on the hair, it's usually going to be low on the blood, and vice versa. So we want to understand how to look at the blood and the hair so we understand what is going on in our physiology, because biochemistry happens mostly in the cells, not the blood. So the blood is still very important because it's a transport medium moving all the goodies around. Blood is the juice of life. So it's a very special juice. So we want to understand what's happening in the blood, but we also want to understand what's happening with the biochemistry in the tissues. And the hair is a reflection of the tissues, telling us tell us what's going on with your biochemistry over the last 4 or 5 or so months.
Mhm. Have you looked at the hair as it relates to the different thyroid hormones or sex hormones or anything? Or is it just
Oh,
minerals?
yeah. So when you're looking at the thyroid hormone or the thyroid ratio on a hair mineral analysis is calcium and potassium. So you need potassium to sensitize thyroid hormone so it can work. But when you have a high calcium shell, when that calcium is really high, that calcium puts up a wall blocking the potassium, then the potassium can't get into the cell, and then you can't sensitize thyroid hormone. So that's why the calcium potassium ratio is the thyroid ratio. So when you see a ratio above a 10 to 1, that's going to be mild hypothyroid. When it goes above a 30 to 1 to a 70 to 1, that's going to be moderate hypothyroid. When that ratio goes to 100 to 1, 150 to 1, 200 to 1, that's severe hypothyroidism. And all their symptoms will match that hypothyroid just from a hair analysis without looking at TSH or T3 or T4 or any of the antibodies associated with the thyroid. And we know mercury loves the thyroid.
Mm.
So look where your thyroid is. It's right here. That's the communication. So the metal of communication, the planet of communication is Mercury. So when you're not communicating, speaking your truth, the metal mercury will bioaccumulate in the organ where we're not speaking our truth because mercury loves the thyroid. So we start to understand the energetics of the metals. We start to understand how they're affecting the organs, glands, and tissues on so many levels.
There is a lab called Idea Labs, and they are testing not the minerals or salts and ratio levels, but they're actually testing hormones and hormone metabolites in tissue, so hair, eyelashes, eyebrows, and nails. And they are pretty confident that the results they are getting are the best way to read what's going on with the different hormones. Like it's the best hormone panel you could get, is their argument. So
What's that test called?
the company is Idea Labs, and it's a hair test. It's a tissue test, but they're doing all the, well, not all the tissues. They're not performing biopsies, but they're doing hair, eyelashes, eyebrows, fingernails, and toenails. Apparently, I think I've heard the founder, who's Georgie Dinkoff, say that toenails seem to give the most accurate result for where your mineral, your hormone status, everything is. It's really interesting. Should
Yeah,
check
I'm going
them.
to have to look into that because I'm not familiar with it. I just know the hair testing has been around for, 70 or so years with very good, reliable information. So if I want to know about estrogen, I want to know about copper, I want to know about sodium because sodium is mostly going to be aldosterone, potassium is mostly going to be associated with cortisol. So that's why we're always looking at the mineral grid to give us insight into the hormonal system. And so when I see that copper dysregulation, now here's something with copper that I found very interesting with the brain. What are the two most prominent diseases of our senior citizens that are wiping us out? We got the
Alzheimer's, yeah.
Alzheimer's and Parkinson's,
Mm.
right? Those two regions of the brain. So when we look at the neuromelanated cells, so melanin, whether it's the eye colors, the skin, the hair color, the skin tones, all melanin is giving you color. Now, in the locus coeruleus, the locus coeruleus, the LC, that's in the pons. So in the brain stem, you got the midbrain, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. So in the locus coeruleus, in the pons, you have a cluster of neuromelanated cells that they call the blue spot. It's blue because of copper. Then in the substantia nigra of the basal ganglia in the brainstem, that's the Parkinsonian diseases. That also comes from neuromelanin. That's why the substantia nigra is pigmented dark. So the dark pigmented melanin in the substantia nigra, the blue spot in the locus coeruleus, has 10x more copper than anywhere else in the entire brain. But neuromelanin comes from melanin. All melanin comes from the tyrosinase enzyme that is absolutely copper dependent. And in the locus coeruleus, that is the hub of your sympathetic nervous system. That is the adrenal gland of your brain. So in that little cluster of cells in the locus coeruleus called the blue spot, it's an enigma. So where's this blue spot and then the dark spot? But those two areas, when copper is dysregulated in a copper overload, the copper will hydroxylate those hydroxyl radicals, destroying the dopamine in the adrenaline system in the locus coeruleus and destroying the dopamine in the substantia nigra, leading to the two most prominent diseases in our seniors: the senility, Alzheimer's, dementia-like diseases, or the dopamine movement Parkinsonian diseases. This is why we really got to look at copper, especially when we see the preponderance of these brain diseases wiping us out. Now think about this, the brain fog we have in our 20s and 30s, that chronic brain fog, if it's unresolved when you hit your 60s and 70s, that will become your senility diseases in your 60s and 70s. So we're giving ample opportunity to correct this stuff, but we keep ignoring it and looking for the wrong things. So I say it comes back to the minerals and understanding how important minerals are in every aspect of human physiology, from our brain health to muscular health to heart health, to every function of the body requires the minerals to be in balance. That was a lot to unpack.
So, well, I've got a follow-up. So, w- based on that, there's a lot of people that are very, shall we say, scared of developing Alzheimer's or Parkinson's because they have a relative, parent, someone, and they've seen what it does to them. And like at that stage where you've hit the point of no return, is there any point in living? Like, I'm not for the maid or any of this assisted death stuff, but it does make you wonder if you're so far gone, what is the point? You're not even in yourself anymore. You're some and your family's suffering. But what I'm getting to is if someone is presenting with the symptoms of early onset Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, or they've gotten a diagnosis, and let's say you could do no lab testing. Let's just say for some reason all the labs were shut down, no testing. What would your approach be if someone came to you and they're presenting these symptoms like I can't remember I put my car keys, I've no memory recall, I can't remember so and so's address, like all of these different symptoms, and you could do no testing. What would you do? Because you mentioned high copper, but then there's also the dysregulation and low copper. So,
Right. See, the thing about any mineral, you can have an excess in one area of the body and be deficient in another area of the body. A prime example of that, I'll come back to your question in a minute. Um, so when you're getting, let's say you're sleeping at night and you get toe cramps or your calves are cramping, okay, that to me is a blessing because that's revealing that magnesium deficiency in the toes, in the calf. That compartment of the body is deficient in magnesium because the magnesium is being driven to the more important organs like your heart, because you got more mitochondria in your heart and your brain. So the concentration to keep the heart going, the magnesium is going to be driven to the more pertinent organs. Meanwhile, you take the hit. Oh, that cramp, it wakes me up.
and that's what we call
Let's
the
see, we
state.
paused a little.
Yeah, I was saying, and that's what we call that kind of state of triage. Though your body's going to take the minerals or the nutrients or whatever to the most important place first. Your toe's not as important as your heart.
It's not life or death. It's a pain in the ass when your toes cramp up and it's waking you up. So that does have to be fixed. But the blessing is it's telling you, you got to pay attention to that cramping. So if someone came to me with every symptom, then they're not full blown Parkinson's or full blown, senility diseases, then I start them with the tissue salts because the tissue salts are going to give you 1 part per million of what, let's say it's magnesium phosphate, tissue salt, mag phos, 1 part per million of magnesium. And when you look at a cell, you know, when we take magnesium in crude dose, we're taking what, 300 to 500 milligrams of magnesium, give or take, maybe 300 to up to 1,000 milligrams of magnesium. How much of that magnesium is in one cell? Not even 1 milligram. Okay, it's equivalent to what a tissue salt is in a 6x potency. It's that 6x potency that gets into the cell, and it's going to go to the most important cell that it's needed in. So the first thing I would do with someone, I have no labs in front of me, I'm looking at their symptoms, I'm going to come in with those tissue salts because they are the safest, gentlest way of addressing the deficiencies, the toxicities, the symptoms, so we can really have an ally that's affordable, that's easy to take. And the thing about it, when you take a tissue salt, doesn't go through digestion, it immediately gets absorbed through the mucosal membrane into the blood, and then once in the blood, the intelligence of that tissue salt will go to where it needs to go. I may have to keep you on it for 6 months to build up the mineral grid so you don't get those cramps and those whatever is going on. So that's the first thing I would do with a patient where I have no labs. All I have is what you're telling me. As long as you're not too far down the road, then there's always hope. But once we hit a certain, critical mass point where there is no point of return, that's when, God, that's when it's out of my hand.
In God's
And
hands at that
I
stage.
watched my mother go down that path. I knew my mom was copper toxic from the get-go. And I remember my mom having periods from hell, 2 weeks out of the month. She was bent over double, horrible. My whole childhood, I just remember her horrible periods. It was anywhere from a week to 2 weeks, depending on, was it the right ovary or the left ovary? One was better than the other. And she had the worst varicosities I've ever seen. So I go, Mom, what are those little blue things? And, she goes, oh, those are my veins. And I go, and I knew that, later in life, those were the varicosities. So she had high varicosities. She had,
High
the
estrogen.
menstrual dysregulation, chronic fatigue, brain fog like no tomorrow. So I knew later in life my mom was copper toxic. It was that copper that gave her the senility, the dementia disease that ended up killing her. So when I go back to that locus coeruleus, the locus coeruleus, depending on how you want to pronounce it, that's the first area to demonstrate neurofibrillary tangles and tau pathology, which is the classic hallmark of Alzheimer's disease. And the locus coeruleus is the first place to demonstrate tau pathology and neurofibrillary tangles. So that's why we want to really understand these minerals, especially with brain health and understanding how important copper is in this day and age. The reason why I keep putting the spotlight on copper, because from an astrological perspective, we're in the Bronze Age. So we've been in the Iron Age, in the Piscean age for the last 2,000 plus years. We're just ushering into the Bronze Age, into the Aquarian age. So understanding, if we're in the Bronze Age, bronze is 90% copper. So the alchemists could have told us that copper would be the most dysregulated metal in all of human physiology. They could have told us that 20,000 years ago because of the age we're in. This is why as above, so below. And as the great physician Hippocrates once said, let food be thy medicine, medicine thy food. Everyone's heard that one, but what no one has
Nobody
ever heard,
follows it.
no one follows it. But the other half of the equation is, he goes, Hippocrates said, you can't call yourself a physician unless you're well schooled in astrology. How many doctors are studying astrology? Not many that I know of. So that's coming from Hippocrates, and every doctor takes what? The Hippocratic Oath. And yet we're not listening to what the elders of the past have told us. So we all heard, let food be thy medicine. All right, that makes sense. But what about the second half of the equation? you can't call yourself a doctor unless you're well versed in astrology. So that to me rung the bell. So that was early in my early career that I had to study astrology so I could become more of a complete doctor.
Mhm. So, but with my question, you did answer it, but just to kind of narrow it down for the audience, in that scenario, you would start someone with low dose tissue salts, which are very bioavailable forms of minerals that you're not ingesting per se. They get absorbed in the mouth through the mucosa, and then you're monitoring that person and how they're giving you that like biofeedback. How are your symptoms? Are things improving? And then that's telling you where you need to titrate or add in something or change whatever it is. Am I correct? That's
Yeah.
how you approach it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. So, when I'm analyzing, from my perspective, I'm always looking at the vital force. Where is the vital force going? So someone can come to me with eczema and I'm treating them and their eczema is still there, but they're sleeping better, they're thinking better, their mood is better, everything is better, but they still got the eczema. So I'm looking at their vital forces going in the right direction. So now I got to have more pinpoint accuracy. Now the last thing to cure is the skin, because skin is, you're not going to die from a skin lesion. It may be itchy, it may be ugly, but you're not going to die. So I'm looking at the vital force. Where is the vital force moving? So I'm adjusting my dosing based on the patient's vital force. Is it moving in the right direction or are they getting worse? Then I need to reassess and stuff like that.
And that's back to what I was saying, that triage effect. Whatever you're giving that patient, the body is saying, well, hold on, that eczema can wait for a bit. We're going to take these minerals and we're going to put them somewhere else where we need them. But she may have not recognized she was having these issues like the sleep or let's just say constipation or spasms or whatever. So, as we both know, the body is innately smart. It knows what to do more than we know what to do. But there, now we've taken care of the sleep, we've taken care of the heart palpitations, the eye twitches, all that fun stuff. Now we're going to titrate up a little bit more so we've enough left over now to fix the eczema.
Exactly. Now, when we understand homeopathy, there's a law called the laws of cure. So when a patient comes to me with some asthma, I treat the asthma and the asthma goes away. And then the eczema that they had as a child now returns. That to me, they're looking at me freaking out. This got better, no asthma, but yet their eczema flared up. That's the laws of cure, going from the more important organ to the less vital organ. And then we say, okay, the vital force is picking up. Now we can go for the more, lesser symptoms like the eczema or whatever it may be.
So the body is saying, hey, you've fixed the majority of the problems here, but we still have a little problem, and we're I am showing you through the skin. Your body is talking to you.
Yeah. And
So,
it, Yeah, when we think of the skin, to me, the skin is like your third kidney. So we got the two kidneys, but your skin is the third kidney. So we want to understand that we don't want all these toxins going through the kidneys. So when the kidneys are congested, then the toxins are going to come out the skin as eczema, psoriasis, and acne and blemishes and this and that. So as we pick up the vital force and the kidneys start to heal, then the skin gets better. So we can also incorporate sauna therapies and, lifestyle changes and all that other stuff to help support the kidneys. And when we look at the kidneys, that represents the planet Venus. And so we see that Venus is it's the law, it's Libra. The kidneys represent Libra. Libra is ruled by the planet Venus. And so the tissue salt for Libras is sodium phosphate, nat phos. That's for all acidity. So anytime we become acidic, we can use nat phos to deal with our GERDs and our acid reflux. And anytime we just then we come in with the tissue salt sodium phosphate, and that you don't have to be a Libra to take sodium phosphate, but it rules the scales of balance, because in Libra the scales of balance are balancing out what? Acid and base. When acid and base are in balance, you have health. And that's why the pH of your blood, 7.3, 7.4, it's a little bit more alkaline because you have an alkaline reserve. You don't have an acid reserve. That's why when I say zinc is the most crucial mineral for alkalining the body, it's because of the kidneys and that carbonic acid that I previously talked about. So that was a little bit all over the place. I'm sorry about
That's
that.
okay. It's interesting because every time you speak, I'm like thinking, I have a client that needs that. I have a client that needs it, which makes me think if someone does have kidney issues, plus a lot of systemic inflammation, aches and pains, which would tell us the body is more acidic, plus they have the digestive issues, would the first salt you would recommend be the sodium phosphate?
It could be. So when I look at it, would be probably some of the sodium family. So sodium phosphate, sodium sulfate, and sodium chloride. So sodium chloride, that's called in homeopathy, that's nat-mer. That's the Latin, natrum muriaticum. So that's sodium chloride. That's the water regulator that's regulating the whole balance of the water element in us, all the fluids of the body, menstrual fluids, cerebral spinal fluids, synovial fluids, digestive fluids. So to answer your question, it'd probably be one of the sodium families. Which one, I'd have to get a little bit more detail what's going on. And then I may come in with other tissue salts. They may need a calcium phosphate. They may need a magnesium phosphate. They may need an iron phosphate. So when I'm working with a patient, I'll usually put them on 3 or 4 tissue salts at one time. Keep them on those tissue salts for 3, 4, 6 months as I analyze where their vital force is going so I can adjust. Oh, maybe they need more silica instead of iron phos. So I can tweak their program as I'm communicating with them of what's coming up, what's getting better, what's getting worse.
Do you agree with the theory of the burn rate as it relates to minerals slash salts in where if someone is in a high state of stress, whatever that stress may be, their burn rate for all these different minerals increases, therefore their requirement increases?
So under any stress, there's gonna be a stronger need. But to me, it's the hidden stressors. It's the stressors you don't see because the body doesn't care if it's an emotional stress, a tiger's chasing you, going through a divorce, death of a loved one, you're in a car accident, you just got fired from your job. The body's going to react the same way as it will to an internal stress, like a chemical, a metal, or a microbes that are gone rogue. So the body has a lot of stresses. So the burn rate, it's a term that I think is overutilized, but it does have some importance because when you're under stress, you're going to burn through more stuff. Yes, your kidneys are going to piss out more of that stuff because most of them won't be retained. So I like to see all the stresses, and it's those hidden stresses, a lot of the unconscious stresses, things, the childhood traumas we forgot about. When you have a childhood trauma, you're going to start building up the calcium because calcium is going to put the brakes on that trauma so you don't die, so you don't go crazy. And then if we don't deal with that high calcium from that trauma, then that calcium keeps growing and growing and going high. We have to go back and revisit that trauma as an adult to put the fire out of that trauma. We need to see it from a different perspective to understand your involvement in that trauma, what happened in that trauma from an adult perspective, because that's all that stuff gets cast into the shadow. The shadow isn't a physical place in the brain. The shadow is the unconsciousness, and that unconsciousness will precipitate out in due time, becoming our illness, disease, and symptoms. So I want to look at patients to understand their burn rate. I want to understand all your stresses because I'm not going for the quick fix of, you just went through this and you're pissing out your magnesium. I want to understand all the stresses you've had from the chemicals, the metals, the childhood traumas, the anything that's happened in your life because it takes time to build up the mineral grid. And I always say everything takes a 7 year cycle. Nothing happens overnight. So it takes 7 years to really start to build up the mineral grid.
Mm. So when you are talking, just again for the audience, because my audience knows me on what I say, when we're talking about salts, we mean minerals. When we're talking about minerals, we're also discussing electrolytes because you already discussed the electrical charge there. Now, I spoke to Wade Lightheart, who was one of the owners of Bioptimizers, their supplement company, and they really just focus on minerals and enzymes. That's their thing. They just make loads of minerals and loads of enzymes. And I had mentioned to Wade in one of our conversations that I believe if most women for sure, but if everybody just took a boatload of electrolytes or minerals, then most of their problems would be solved.
You broke up, you know that?
Oh, so I was saying that I had said to Wade that I believe that most women for sure and men, if they took a boatload of electrolytes every single day and minerals, then a lot of their problems would be cured.
So the question, what's the question for me?
No, do you agree with that? Like if we just focused on a lot of electrolytes slash minerals, a lot of the issues many people would be solved because back to that burn rate, whatever we're dealing with, we don't have enough to manage our daily stresses and demands and bodily functions.
There is some truth in what you're saying, but we got to remember that mineral isn't going to take its parking space back until the toxic metal comes out of the enzyme binding site. So taking too many minerals, thinking that we're going to fix all the imbalances, that's going to put stress on your kidneys. And then you're asking your kidneys to deal with all these metals that can cause damage to the kidneys. So that's why I don't like to go super aggressive with anything. Now, that's why I do like to test to see how aggressive I need to be with zinc or copper or whatever. So I don't like to just say, just take a gazillion electrolytes because you got this symptom and that symptom. Because how do we know taking all those minerals that they're getting into the enzyme binding site? Because if you have mercury in you, one ion of mercury will displace 1,000 ions of zinc. And so, if I was to magically remove every drop of mercury from every tissue, organ, and gland in you, and I take that mercury that I just magically removed from you, I put it in a syringe, inject it back into you, you would die. The body layers these toxic metals. So, I would say we got to work for the minerals. So, instead of taking excessive mega doses, we got to hit the detox and start working on how do we get these toxic metals out. So we got to start understanding energy, vibration, frequency medicine. We got to understand detoxification pathways, detoxification strategies. We got to understand how the mental mind is retaining a lot of these metals because most adults are what we call poor eliminators. A poor eliminator means you're loaded with toxic metals, but they come very low on a hair test or on a blood test, but they're loaded in
Still,
you.
yeah.
They're still there, so they're hiding out. Then once you start doing the detox, then you're going to see a copper dump or a mercury dump or a lead dump. So I say I'm not big into just doing heroic doses of anything because you got a symptom. With tissue salts, a little bit different because that's 1 part per million. So I may have, if I see a symptom, I may say take 20 mag phos until that cramp goes away, and then I'd rather do that because that's still a micro dose of the mineral that's not going to put undue stress to the kidneys. You don't want to mess with the kidneys. The liver can take a beating. It's a workhorse. The kidneys are gentle little organs. So that's why I don't like to go crazy with minerals because of its effect on the kidneys.
You just mentioned something there, which was actually my next question. You said displacement. Do you think using minerals or tissue salts is effective at displacing heavy metals combined with the other detoxification protocols, sauna, heat therapy, all the different things. You think that is not an effective approach, but do you think that's the proper approach
I
that
think
most
it's the
people should be looking
proper
for?
approach because to remove a toxic metal, the all-seeing brain will never put you in harm's way unless we force, through chelating agents, we force the metal out. There's a place for chelating agents in acute exposure. I get that. I'm talking about chronic exposure in utero from the vaccines and all the garbage we've inhaled and injected and breathed and whatever. So when we're detoxing, the adrenal reserves have to pick up. You need energy to mobilize out a toxic metal. You need patency in the organs of detoxification, meaning the bile has to be moving, meaning the lungs have to be breathing, the skin has to be breathing. Then when the organs of elimination are getting better, the adrenal reserves have picked up, then the all-seeing brain will say, now it's safe to start. Going to see the zinc came on board, the calcium came on board, the magnesium came on board. Now those minerals can take their parking space back while the toxic metal comes out.
Mm. So we've discussed a lot of the energetic systems there, the metabolic health. This is just for my own curiosity, and of course the audience's. As far as it pertains to like the current conversation that you see everywhere, and I'm sure you have seen it everywhere, um, with hormones and perimenopause, are you getting many women approach you for help with the symptoms that we would associate with hormone imbalances or perimenopause, or is that not like something women would think of because, salts, minerals?
Yeah. So first, when we say a salt, so that's you take a calcium, which is a cation, you combine that with an anion like phosphorus. So phosphorus is an acid, and then you have calcium, which is a alkaline base mineral. So you combine a yeah. So the cations are you have a cation and an anion. So the three anions, phosphorus, sulfur, chloride, those have more of a negative charge, where the positive calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. When you combine a calcium with a phosphate, that creates a salt. That's a calcium phosphate. A cation with an anion makes a salt. Now, here's what's interesting about the salts. The four fixed signs of the zodiac. So you got cardinal, fixed, mutable. Those are the three modes in astrology. The four fixed signs of the zodiac is Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, Taurus. SALT, salt. It's fixed in the stars. We are the salts of salvation. It's as above, so below. So understanding how important these minerals, salts really are is amazing when we start to understand that we're not just taking magnesium, we're taking the energy of the sun. We're taking that copper, we're taking that Venetian energy. So that's what I mean by we're working for the mineral. So if an adult is a poor eliminator, they got to understand, pick up the adrenal reserves, better patency in the organs of elimination, and energetically, where am I having an issue with Saturn? Maybe you're in a calcium shell. Maybe you haven't faced some of the themes of Saturn that we need to embrace. So that's kind of my approach with mineral balancing, is looking at that energy, looking at the physical work we got to do, looking at the minerals we got to take. And when those minerals come on board, then yes, that mercury will come out, and yes, the cadmium will come out, and we'll go through multiple metal dumps. You're not going to dump them all in one shot. You can go 1 year with no metal dumps, and all of a sudden things are going good. You go through a year of, a lead dump, a mercury dump, or lead dump, and then you may take a break as the adrenal reserves pick up again. Then you're going to dump out another metal. Each time you dump out a metal, you get healthier and healthier. The vital force gets better and better, because those are the metals of disease. If we don't get them out, They're going to alter the pH and the enzymes, destroying human health. That means the nutrient mineral isn't getting where it needs to be when a toxic metal is there.
So then part of what I'd mentioned, if these women come to a hormone or perimenopause issues, you're looking at, well, what is the influence of metals here, but also then the symptoms as they associate to the planets, and then what salt would be helpful there. And back to what we were saying earlier about monitoring their symptoms and how they improve them.
Yeah, let's look at men for a minute. Let's pick on men. Have you noticed the males today, their sperm count is critically low? The male sperm count has decreased 50% in the last 60 years. For billions of years, the sperm count has been, robust. It's been strong. And then over in 60 years, now men are shooting blanks. Okay, that's because they're zinc deficient. You need zinc for sperm. And so how do they understand, getting zinc into them? But if you have a lot of mercury, cadmium, or excess copper, you're kicking out the zinc and you're going to be bankrupt in sperm. Testosterone. So then we look at you could look at all all sex hormones. So I don't care what the sex hormone, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, vitamin D, cortisol, aldosterone, all your sex hormones need a zinc finger because that zinc finger will take the hormone. Remember, hormones are fat soluble, so they're not exerting their effect on the cell membrane, they're exerting their effect in the cell nucleus. So to get it into the nucleus, you need a zinc finger, which is called a hormone response element, an HRE, or for example, a VDR, a vitamin D receptor, is a zinc finger to get that vitamin D into the nucleus so it can be transcribed and eventually translated into a usable protein that takes zinc. But who thinks of zinc in hormones? So all your sex hormones better have a zinc finger so it can get it into the nucleus for transcription to happen. So when I'm looking at sex hormones, I'm obviously looking at the mineral grid behind their deficiencies of this hormone or excess of this or that. And that's even thyroid hormone needs a zinc finger. So it's not just your sex hormones, it's thyroid hormones, sex hormones, and all your fat soluble vitamins need a zinc finger to allow that hormone to bind to the DNA binding domain. So again, it can be transcribed and eventually translated into a usable protein.
What about the adrenals then? Because the adrenals, obviously a big player in all the hormones, but also connected tightly to the thyroid.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at the adrenal gland, so on the mound of Venus, the two kidneys, that's the mound of Venus, sit Mars, adrenal. So that's that kidney, that's that Mars Venus dialect, adrenal gland, Mars Venus. And so remember, those kidneys are regulated by that locus coeruleus, is the adrenal gland of the brain. That's communicating. The locus coeruleus, that small little center, that blue spot in your brain, sends neuroadrenaline to every part of your brain to awaken it, to stimulate it, to say, do this, do that. And that is always pulsing out anywhere between 1 to 20 hertz. So if you're sleeping, it's, that adrenaline's coming out at about 1. But if you're running from a wild tiger or someone has a gun to your head, that's pumping out at 20 hertz. So this locus coeruleus, the sympathetic hub in your brain, is communicating with your adrenal glands via the vagus nerve, and there's a feedback mechanism of communication because the neurochemistry. So when you say neuroepinephrine, neuro meaning neurology in the brain, or epinephrine is a hormone, but it's the same molecule, just one is in the brain, one is in the adrenal gland to make the muscles move or the heart. So, but this is controlling all of that. So your question was the adrenal glands, and what was the exact
How
question?
important was that zinc connection? Because you said it was so important for all the hormones, including thyroid. So how important is zinc and minerals overall for the adrenal glands?
Absolutely critical. So the in Chinese medicine, they always called there was three treasures: qi, jing, and shen. The jing is what they call the kidney adrenal complex. Most of Chinese medicine, most of the herbs, 70% of those herbs are for the jing to support the kidney adrenal complex. In those herbal tonics, it's the mineral matrix combined with those, with those herbal concoctions, but it's the mineral matrix in those herbs that help to influence the jing, which is a treasure because they knew 10,000 years ago if you don't restore the jing, you're going to premature age not gracefully. So that's why a lot of the Chinese medicine herbs was basically mineral rich herbs to support the kidney adrenal complex.
Mm. I really do believe, and back to what we said earlier, that minerals are a huge factor in what you just said. Aging gracefully in that longevity conversation, they should be a staple, but they generally are not. Or like inflammaging, like I mentioned earlier, all of these signs and symptoms of aging, I think minerals help us age gracefully, like you said.
They certainly do. That's why we put the spotlight on the mineral matrix, because the mineral grid to get a reaction. So if I want to lower your blood pressure, I'm going to put you on a calcium channel blocker. So they're blocking calcium. Remember, calcium contracts. So they put you on a calcium channel blocker to block the calcium so your heart's not beating as fast to lower the blood pressure. But that's affecting calcium in every aspect of the body. Remember, you need that calcium to untether the neuron to release dopamine or adrenaline or acetylcholine or whatever the neurotransmitter. That calcium is a cell signal. That calcium is needed for the bone health. So when you give a pharmaceutical drug, a calcium channel blocker, you're blocking the calcium in the heart, but you're blocking it everywhere in the body. So your diuretics, they're giving you a diuretic to decrease the blood volume. Meanwhile, you're pissing out all your nutrient minerals at the cost of what? Fixing a blood lab because you're elevated blood pressure when we didn't understand how to get magnesium on board, how to balance out the calcium magnesium ratio, how to balance out the sodium potassium ratio. Back in the 1940s, the diuretic that they were giving you was called the mercurial diuretics. They were giving you mercury as a diuretic. That mercury diuretic went to the convoluted tubules in your kidney, affecting the carbonic anhydrase enzyme, where you were pissing out buttloads of zinc at about 1,000 to 1 clip just to lower blood pressure while depleting your minerals. Meanwhile, you feel like a corpse, but yet you're alive. That's not how you treat health. You treat health the old-fashioned way. You build people up slowly over time as we work for the minerals. So it's not just popping a pill, it's working for the mineral, understanding that you got to do the work. Everyone wants, tell me what to take, doc. That's practicing what the doctors do. We want to teach people how to cultivate health. Cultivate health is on a spiritual level, physical level, biochemical level, and an emotional level. When we amalgamate all that together, now we can really exalt our health to a much better place if we show patience, persistence, and consistency on the healing journey.
But it all has to start with taking responsibility for your healing.
Taking responsibility. It's like we like to cast the blame out there. We're all guilty of blaming. It's the mercury, it's the lead, poor mothering, McDonald's, whatever. We got to take the responsibility. I'm responsible for my own health, no one else. Once we take that responsibility, now what am I going to do about it? Well, I'm going to quit poisoning myself. I'm going to make better decisions on all levels with my relationships, with my food, with my sleep, and I'm going to have health practices, and I'm going to still enjoy life, because I'm taking every day, I'm taking a little time to cultivate my health practices. That doesn't mean you become a hermit and sit in your cave and meditate all day. You still have relationships, you still got to work, you still got to be human. But when you start feeling good, the zest for life dramatically increases. Even on bad, shitty days, you can have a bad day, but you're still going to be in a good mood, even when, we're weathering this or weathering that. So cultivating health is a mindset, and that's where we got to turn people on. How do we cultivate health? Be consistent, be persistent, and understand we're going to have some good days, we're going to have some bad days. When we have a bad day, look at that as a blessing, because it's not killing you, but it's telling you we still got some work to do.
Oh yeah. When will there never be work? But something you said earlier really resonated with me as it related to the salts. You said that the salts were selective in the tissues they go to do their magic. And it made me think of molecular hydrogen. And molecular hydrogen is a selective antioxidant. For the audience, that basically means that it's an antioxidant, but it doesn't go to every part of the body. It only goes to where you need the help. And that's what the salts do, from what you said.
The tissue salts go specifically where the body needs it the most. So that's a tissue salt. Now, if you're cramping up, it's going to send its energy to that, to get that magnesium to bring that magnesium so it can oppose the calcium so you're not contracting and spazzing. So it will direct the mineral in the appropriate way to address it while we're building up the mineral grid with crude doses. So we don't want to go crazy and take mega doses of anything, because like I said, it's going to upset the kidneys. You don't want to disrupt the balance of the kidneys, because the kidneys are absolutely vital. So that's why I love using tissue salts. And when I talk about the tissue salts, we have 12 tissue salts, but we actually have 33 tissue salts. Everyone's heard of the 12 tissue salts, but no one's heard of the other 21 tissue salts
I don't
because
think
they
everyone has heard of the 12 tissue salts. We've heard of
I'm
the
in my
four.
own world over here, so I think
Yeah.
everyone reads what I read, but
I'm
I
like
guess
that
not.
too. I assume everybody knows everything I know, and then I get told I need to slow down.
Right. So the tissue salts can be, no one may have even heard of a tissue salt, but the tissue salts are a form of homeopathy, but they're in a 6x potency, so they're not potentized beyond Avogadro's number. When you're past Avogadro's number, that means you're dealing with no crude material at all. There's nothing in there. And so with a tissue salt in a 6x, it could be a 3x, 6x, or 12x potency, you still have about 1 part per million, whether it's iron, magnesium, sodium, potassium, silica, calcium, whatever. So you have about 1 part per million. It's that 1 part per million that gets into the cell. That's the beautiful ingenious of the tissue salts. So we can, if I see a pattern on someone and they're in a 4 low pattern, that means calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium are well below their optimal levels. I'm going to put you on some tissue salts to increase calcium, to increase sodium, to increase potassium, to increase sodium. So you'll be on one calcium family, one sodium family, one potassium family, and mag phos. And that will help to build up the mineral grid to get you out of a 4 low pattern. Because a 4 low pattern is one of the more serious patterns. That's what we call the tunnel of death. So a 4 low is you're in the tunnel. So
That's
we
not a
have to
scary
slow
name
that.
at all.
Yeah, it's a scary one, but you go to any senior home, most of your adults are in a 4 low pattern. And so we want to build up that mineral grid, and that's where the tissue salts are indisputable. They're just wonderful, brilliant remedies to add, especially children. You give a child some zinc, the zinc makes their tummy sick and they want to throw up. Maybe you start them with the tissue salt zinc chloride and you build them up slowly with the zinc chloride while you microdose zinc in crude dose to build them up.
hmm And by crude, you mean raw, unrefined minerals.
The physical mineral.
Hmm Well, Dr. Selig, I think you have opened a whole Pandora's box with me because now I'm thinking of, when you mention children, I'm thinking of disabilities, all these new diagnoses of autism that we're getting, the ADHD, all of these mental health issues that even our young are having. So that's probably going to be a whole other conversation.
I lost you again.
Yeah, we're back. What I was saying is, I think you've opened a Pandora's box because, as you mentioned, kids there, I'm thinking of like all these kids with their new diagnoses of autism, ADHD, our young adults, teenagers that have mental health issues. That's probably a whole other conversation. And we know that a lot of these kids and teenagers and young adults do not have good nutrition as it is.
Right. It's so common today. I mean, we got kids with bad brains, we got adults with bad brains, and our seniors can't even remember their names. So we got to fix the brains. To fix the brains, we got to understand, the physical diet component, lifestyle component, and then most importantly, we got to understand the minerals. And that's why when we start picking up the minerals, we can start, reverse engineering decades of toxicity because most of the children are born in utero with toxic metals. Think of when a mother's giving birth, they're dropping uh, oxytocin, synthetic oxytocin, the Pitocin. Pitocin causes what? Contraction. So it's causing calcium to be released to cause a contraction. That's going to upset the calcium magnesium ratio. When magnesium isn't on board, then the aluminum will be absorbed. Then the aluminum gets into the brain. There's the bad brain. So these things are going on 24/7. So we got a lot of work to do. And it takes the little you, the little me, talking about this stuff. Now, we may have different perspectives on how we go about it, but at the end of the day, we all want better health for our children. We want better health for everyone, but especially the children.
Yeah, well, I think to go along with what you just said there is what's practitioner. We all want to help. We all want to make a difference because we know there are other ways. There is alternatives. You don't have to go the conventional route all the time. And even if we don't all align exactly with our teaching, we still foundationally, we all want to help.
Exactly. And
Mm.
that's why I'm not going to criticize. I may not agree with practitioner A, B, and C, but I'll disagree a lot more with a medical doctor prescribing A, B, and C. So maybe I don't agree 100%
Mm.
with this guy saying, but it's still 1,000 times better than giving you a pharmaceutical drug to try to pretend to fix whatever they're pretending to fix because it never works.
Well, giving someone mercury to reduce their blood volume seems like a terrible idea
Yeah, that
anyway.
was in the 1940s, mercurial diuretics. And that's how we figured out how mercury displaces zinc was through that mechanism.
That's that. I don't know. Is that where the problems with conventional medicine began? Who knows?
It began many moons ago because, when we look at the Rockefeller medicine, they deleted the homeopaths. They knew the homeopaths were competing with them. They bought them all out. And
Mm.
once they bought them out, they just shelved it. So they bought all their medical schools, they bought their universities, they bought their pharmacies, and just shelved it. And they just basically deleted homeopathy because they controlled the money. They controlled the funding of this hospital, paying the salaries of the researchers, the medical doctors, the institutions. And so they wiped out homeopathy because homeopathy was such very strong in the 1800s. Up to World War I, homeopathy was probably the most popular form of medicine in the world.
hmm And then,
But
yeah, once you control,
Rockefeller medicine just, bought them out. And, we, we just, we're just playing Russian roulette with these pharmaceutical drugs. So if a woman has preeclampsia, she's delivering a baby and she develops preeclampsia, which is seizures and hypertension, the MD knows, MD stands for mineral deficient. So the MD knows that he can't give the pregnant mother a drug because he may have a lawsuit if it affects the fetus. What do? They do an IV drip of magnesium sulfate or magnesium chloride. Works like a charm.
So with
But
some of the old ways, they have to accept that they have to accept them. Like these work and we don't have an alternative. So yeah, we will use these, but we won't use everything else.
right, because if you're having a heart attack, they'll give you five drugs to get the heart in normal rhythm. If the fifth drug doesn't work, then they will come in with magnesium chloride or magnesium sulfate.
No wonder why they wouldn't just do that in the first place. Is it because
Right.
there's no money in it?
You can't patent a mineral. So that's why the pharma drugs are so powerful. And then the brainwashing. I love watching basketball. So I'm watching my NBA games. There's a drug commercial coming on for this and for that. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah, I don't
what is
watch
going on
TV.
here?
I don't watch TV, but when we're on vacation, if my kids have it on, I always make sure to point out to them, isn't it funny the way they put the disclaimer at the end? You may have a risk of this, 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 and death, and
In
this.
death. Yeah,
And
death is
like,
just a
if you
small
even,
little side effect.
yeah, if you even feel the need to put that there, then maybe I'm not going to try it. But
Yeah, and this is the brainwashing under the pharmacratic inquisition is controlling our minds. And you take this, you're going to be look like the actor, the actress in the commercial. It's mind manipulation. So we got to come back to basics, and that's why minerals are such a foundational piece.
mhm.
That's why I love minerals.
With that said, Dr. Selig, we're going to wrap up now, but I have one question for you just to wrap up. It's if we could leave women with three things they could start doing today, like this week, to improve their mineral status without spending a fortune on stuff, what would be our recommendations?
I would say look into magnesium, zinc, selenium, iodine. I would look into the tissue salts, and then I would understand that when you go into menopause, let's say 50 is menopause. Well, yeah, I know everyone's a little different.
Yeah,
So when you go into menopause, the ovaries shut down. Who picks up the slack?
the adrenals.
The adrenal glands. If you don't fix the adrenal glands by the time you go into menopause, now you're asking your already burnt out adrenal glands to do double the work. That's when you go into severe bone loss. And, it's not just the bones and, the osteopenias and porosis. It's the bones, the marrow makes your red blood cells. That's all the anemias, leukemias, and autoimmune, your white blood cells. So we got time to fix, so if you're a 30-year-old woman and you're already in adrenal burnout, you got time to fix it. So keep that in the back of your mind that it's not going to happen overnight. We got to hit the detox. We got to hit the mineralization. We got to hit the tissue salt. And I would say if you're new to this, get some trained eyes in your corner to assist you on your healing journey. You find someone that you feel comfortable. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable working with me, but there's many temperaments that will fit someone's personality, someone that understands minerals, someone that maybe understands homeopathy, maybe someone that understands detoxification and diet and lifestyle. So just make sure that if women do anything, that everything is fixable, everything. But most of us have stagnant fatty livers. You can repair a fatty liver. Once the fatty liver starts to lay down the fibrosing and the calcification, cirrhosis, malignancy. But when you have a fatty liver, that can repair. Once we get into that calcification, that's when it's very difficult. So whatever symptom you have, don't look at that as the enemy. Look at it. That's a blessing. That's a gift telling you something has to change, and you start to cultivate health.
And don't look at it as the end. Just because you've got a diagnosis, that's not the end of your story. But I just want to add on to one thing that you said there, because I know a lot of my listeners are midlife women, perimenopause, that if you are in a state of adrenal burnout in your 30s, mid 30s, even early 40s, and you don't fix that, this is why we see what you said. When the ovaries stop working, the adrenals cannot take over. They can't because there's nothing left.
They're
So,
burnt out.
yeah, if you've had, we see this all the time. When I say we, I mean like people who work in hormones, is the more stress a woman has had across the last decade or two of her life, the worse that stress was or is, the worse her perimenopause symptoms will be. Definitely, like there's no argument about it. That's stress is everything.
Yeah. And that's like what I said. Like if you have, chronic brain fog in your early 20s and 30s, if you don't address those adrenals now, then that chronic brain fog will become the senility dementia diseases in your 60s and 70s. So we got to do the homework. In doing the homework is make it fun, make it exciting, make it doable. You don't have to be perfect. I don't care about perfection. That doesn't exist. But when you stay consistent on your healing journey, you're going to get there. If you hit a speed bump, don't worry about it. You'll get through it. That's why it's good to have trained eyes in your corner in the initial phase.
Oh, for
And that's why you
sure.
want to build people up because we can heal. If your body can grow a cancer, it can dissolve a cancer.
Yeah,
But that's
absolutely.
that's the first cancer. Once the first one's been, you know, dealt with chemo or whatever, radiation or surgery, if you haven't dealt with it naturally, then that second time that cancer comes back, it's a lot more difficult. But the first cancer, and what minerals behind cancer? What's the primary mineral behind cancer?
Mm, calcium.
Zinc.
Zinc again. Well,
Have you ever heard of the P53 gene?
I have, yes.
So the P53 gene, aka the guardian of the genome, the apoptosis gene, the anti-cancer gene. For that gene to work, you got to have a zinc finger because that allows that protein to fold into a three-dimensional shape so it can bind to the DNA binding domain so it can stop the cell cycle, repair it, or delete it. So that's how important zinc is in cancer.
I think that's a great place for us to wrap up, because if we haven't convinced people with the cancer that minerals are just essential. Like I can't say they're so important. They are so important, but they're essential for life.
Absolutely.
I think we've done a good job. We went down a few different rabbit holes there, but I think we
All
covered.
over the place I was, so I apologize for
No, it's
that, but
okay. It's okay because I don't really do questions. I usually just listen, and then wherever you may have picked up, I start thinking of what the next question is. But I think we did it a service. Hopefully, people now realize the importance of having minerals, not only in their diet, but in their body. Dr. Selig, where can people find out more about you and follow your work?
I have a lot of YouTube videos talking about this stuff. Um, if someone wants to become a patient, they go to Back to Natural Health, they fill out the intake form, and they have to pass the first test. My wife, she's going to interview you. She's old school Bulgarian, got the European accent, so old school. So she's going to see if we're a fit together. She's going to explain how we work. Then once you pass through her, then she's going to set up, or she's going to give my information so you can reach out to me to set up a Zoom to see if I think we're a fit together, a fit to work together. Then if I think we're a fit to work together, then we're going to work together and I'm going to run hair, blood, stool, urine. So I'm going to profile you from that perspective
Do you work with people all over the world, or are you
all over the
limited?
world.
So for the testing, are you posting people tests, or how? Because I know certain limitations depending on where you are.
Yeah, so someone in Australia I had, they can't run labs through me. So I told them, send me the hair sample, incognito, hide the hair sample like you're sending me a little postcard, love note or whatever. Put the hair sample in the envelope. Then I mail the hair sample off to the lab. Then I tell them what blood markers I want that they can get locally by their primary care.
So you have a specific hair lab you like to work with.
Only two labs in the country do it right. Most wash the hair. So when you wash the hair to remove contaminants, you're affecting sodium and potassium. Then you don't get a good sodium potassium reading, and that is arguably one of the most important ratios in all of human physiology. That's
Okay.
why I only trust two labs.
So if someone was to do their own test, I'm sure they could still ask you for a second opinion depending on where they got it done.
Depending on, but in the United States, I know only two labs. So other countries, I don't know.
Okay. Well, Dr. Selig, this was a pleasure, and thank you again for making some time. Maybe we will do a follow-up conversation in a few months about the children and their
Yeah,
diagnosis epidemic. I feel like that's just a huge rabbit hole to go down because that just seems to be out of control right now.
it's out of control. I see a lot of bad brains with our kids. So we'll see, get in touch with me, 4 or 5 months down the road. And
Yeah.
if we want to, we'll talk to kids.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Selig, it was a pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
It was a pleasure being here. I always love talking minerals.
I can
Never gets
tell.
old.
Yeah. Well, you're clearly doing what you love.
I sure am.
Well, you have a great day and we'll chat soon.